Gopi Jana Balaba Giri Varadhari Jasura Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Jasura Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Shamuna Tira Bonachari Shamuna Tira Bonachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Balaba Giri Varadhari Jasura Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Jasura Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Shamuna Tira Bonachari Shamuna Tira Bonachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Gopi Jana Balaba Giri Varadhari Gopi Jana Balaba Giri Varadhari Jasura Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Jasura Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Shamuna Tira Bonachari Shamuna Tira Bonachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jayam Vishnu Pada Paramhansa Paribrajagacharya Sotara Sadashi Srimad Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnu Pada Paramhansa Paribrajagacharya Sotara Sadashi Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Shekho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana Ki Jai. Shri Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Navadvip Dham Ki Jai. Shri Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Shri Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. Tulsi Devi Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Gangamaya Ki Jai. Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. Shama Veda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Narayanam Naraskricham Naram Chaibam Narotamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jaya Mudirayat Nasta Parayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttamashlokir Bhavati Bhaktir Naishtiki. We're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, 16th chapter, 35th text. Kavasaheta viraham purushottamasya. Kavasaheta viraham purushottamasya. Pramavaloka ruchira smitabal gujalpai. Staryam samana maharam madhumaninam. Ramotsavamana yadangri vitankitaya Kavasaheta viraham purushottamasya Prema valoka ruchira smitavalgu jalpahai Saryam samanamaram madhumaninam Ramotsava mama yadangri vitankitaya Kavasaheta varaham urushotamasya Ruchirasmal bhavokagumavdapahai Madhumaranyam Ramotsava mama yadangri vitankitaya Ka, who, va, either, saheta, can tolerate, viraham, separation, purusha uttamasya, of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, prema, loving, avaloka, glancing, ruchira smita, pleasing smile, Balgu japai, hearty appeals, staryam, gravity, samanam, along with passionate wrath, aharat, conquered, madhu, sweethearts, maninanam, women such as Satyabhama, Roma Utsavaha, hair standing on end, out of pleasure. Mama, mine. Yat, whose. Angri, feet. Vitang kitaya, imprinted with. Translation. Who, therefore, can tolerate the pangs of separation from that Supreme Personality of Godhead? He could conquer the gravity and passionate wrath of his sweethearts like Satyabhama by his sweet smile of love, pleasing glance, and hearty appeals. When he traversed my earth's surface, I would be immersed in the dust of his lotus feet, and thus would be sumptuously covered with grass, which appeared like hairs standing on me out of pleasure. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. There were chances of separation between the Lord and his thousands of queens because of the Lord's being absent from home. But as far as his connection with earth was concerned, the Lord would traverse the earth with his lotus feet, and therefore there was no chance of separation. When the Lord left the surface of the earth to return to his spiritual abode, the earth's feelings of separation were therefore more acute. The verse again. Who, therefore, can tolerate the pangs of separation from that Supreme Personality of Godhead? He could conquer the gravity and passionate wrath of his sweethearts like Satyabhama by his sweet smile of love, pleasing glance, and hearty appeals. When he traversed my earth's surface, I would be immersed in the dust of his lotus feet, and thus would be sumptuously covered with grass, which appeared like hairs standing on me out of pleasure. Om Agyanati Mirandasya Ganaranjana Salakaya Chaksun Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Karamayam Dati Swaparantikam Mukam Karoti Bachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yatkri Pataraham Bande Shri Guru Dinatarane. In the purport, there's mention of the earth's being unable to tolerate the absence of the Lord from her surface. Of course, this is the personification of the earth speaking as the cow representing the earth. And there's a comparison here to the Lord's queens. The comparison is that the queens would have to tolerate the Lord's separation because he would be absent from home for a time. But because he was always traversing on the earth, there was not the same level of separation until the Lord finally left the earth separation. There's a burden, not really a burden, but you might call it a burden of love, when the earth was feeling the footprints or footsteps of the Lord. Vishwanath Chakravarti talks about the burdens of love being 2 or 3 in number. One is the wife feels the weight of the husband as a burden of love. She feels the weight of her child as a burden of love. And a capitalist feels the burden of great wealth and lots of money as a burden but a burden of love. So it's tolerated and sought at its pleasure giving. It's kind of interesting that Prabhupada points out the difference of Krishna's queens and the earth, and how the earth doesn't feel the same level of separation because Krishna is present during his earthly pastimes on the earth. I want to read a part of a conversation that was held in 1972 in about February between Prabhupada and his followers. They were reporting how his books were being sold in different languages. I think the total at that time, 1977, was something like 43 million. So this person is reading to Prabhupada, and he's giving the different numbers of books that were sold in different languages. He says, "We have the figures for the production of your books in every single language since the beginning." This means that since the books were being printed, which was probably about 1973 or 74, it's only a couple of years, 23 languages. And then Rameshwar says, "This took several weeks of very careful work to prepare. We were calling up printers. We threatened Dynapon. They must give us the figures. We called up every BBT office around the world. So this is very accurate. And also I estimate that at least 90 to 95% of all these literatures that have been published have already been distributed." So these are the figures of how many books were actually printed, not the distribution figures. But as he's saying, they probably already have been distributed. These are the figures for publishing, but most of them have been sold. Radha. So English is first. 43,450,000 literatures. Prabhupada. Where is such a publisher? Radha. That's one for every 5 people in America. And the second is Spanish, 2,947,000. Third is German, 2,125,500. Then Japanese, I had to make a guess, I'm not sure, but this is pretty close, 2,125,000. Fifth is French, 1,670,000. Prabhupada. There should be a big board. It should be hung. Rameshwar. We have a big display of this for the Mayapur exhibit. We made this up as a Prabhupada. Yes, Radha Ballabha. In the exhibit, there is a framed picture, each language and the books, each title, and then there is one big frame, one showing international. Prabhupada. This is the blessing of my Guru Maharaj. He wanted it. And because we are trying to do this, he is giving us all blessings. He told me personally, quote, "I wanted to sell this marble and publish some books," end quote. Calcutta, that Gaudiya Math is also marble floor. Now, he said, quote, "Since this temple has been given by Mr. Datta, our men are fighting. Which room shall I occupy?" So I know there will be blazing fire here. So before that, I wanted to get out this marble and sell it and turn it into some books. He told me like that. So I noted down that. He wants books. So I tried to do all that. That's all. This shows that technological advances can be used in the service of Krishna. The printing press was probably invented about 300 or 400 years ago. Nonetheless, it was considered a very important thing for propagating Krishna consciousness. We're probably, most of us, aware that Bhaktisiddhanta's, one of his symbols, or logos or emblems, was a mridanga with a printing press inside it. And his saying was that if you beat a mridanga, you may be heard for a distance of half a kilometer or a whole kilometer. But if you print books, you can reach people in millions and millions of miles away. Rameshwar. At the Shiva Ratri festival in Los Angeles, at the end of a lecture, I was reading these figures. We had 1,000 Indians who came to that festival in Los Angeles. When I read these figures, they were so struck. They were cheering Jaya and clapping. They were just amazed. And afterwards, outside, they were coming up to me with folded hands, quote, "We had no idea you were doing this work. Is there anything we can do to help your society?" End quote. As they heard these figures, as soon as they heard these figures, the leaders of the Indian American Association and all the Indian associations in LA were coming there. And when they heard these figures, they were just offering their service. Prabhupada. And you did not send to the reporters and no, Hari, sorry. Did you give these figures to the reporters at the airport? Rameshwar. Well, we want to have a press conference tomorrow, Gargamuni. We are going to have at the Calcutta Book Fair, we finished decorating our pandal, and it promises to be very successful. We were just opposite the Americans, who have spent 50,000 rupees, the American embassy. And next door to us is the German embassy, and on the other side is the British embassy. So we're in a very good spot. And we'll have all our books. We'll have the displays as well as the movie, the BBT movie, and we have our men there who will take orders and sell books. It starts tomorrow afternoon, and we will have a press conference and release these figures. Prabhupada, that's nice. Radha Ballabha. Want to hear more? Prabhupada, yes. Radha Ballabha. Sixth is Portuguese, 835,000. Seventh Dutch, 593,000. Eighth Italian, 448,000. Ninth Hindi, 315,000. 10th Bengali, 305,000. 11th is Telugu, 115,000. 12th is Swahili. This is also another estimate, 110,000. 14th is Chinese, 50. It doesn't have it just trails off. 55 something. 13th is Gujarati, 90,000. 14th is Chinese, 55,000. 15th is Marathi, 25,000. Korean, 20,000. Yugoslavian, 20,000. Oriya, 20,000. Polish, 10,000. Hungarian, 10,000. Czechoslovakian, 10,000. Tamil, 10,000. Russian, 5,000. And the total, this is the total, 53,314,000. Radha Ballabha. For the next printing of Bhagavad Gita, so much paper was ordered that it would take 76 train cars to carry it. I think in India they call them something like wagons, is that right? Yeah, something like that. Rameshwar, in America they call them boxcars. They've written us a letter about this. They have never received such a paper order at one time for one book. We have a letter glorifying the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust from the paper company, and another letter from the printer. This is the largest. Prabhupada. These letters should be published. Radha Ballabha. They're the second largest printer in America, and they say they've never printed so many of one book. Rameshwar. We had a ceremony for our new warehouse opening up in opening of the new warehouse, and they published one article in the papers in California. It circulates about 50,000, this local paper. It says, quote, Hare Krishna Publishing Office opens. Culver City Councilman Paul Jacobs assisted the Hare Krishna leaders cut the ceremonial ribbon last week at the grand opening of the Hare Krishna Movement's new office building in Culver City Business Park at 8500 Higuera Street. The new 30,000 square foot warehouse and office building will house the organization's publishing arm. the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust, parentheses, BBT. BBT prints millions of dollars worth of books every year and is the world's largest publisher and distributor of books on the culture, religion, and philosophy of India, end quote. Prabhupada, present this in the court. This is at a time when there was a court battle going on between ISKCON and the anti-cult or deprogramming movement. Rameshwar. It publishes it in 18 languages, quote unquote. But now we're seeing it's 23 languages. Made a mistake. Including Russian, the books are predominantly translations of Indian classics by the movement's founder and director, Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, end quote. So this was in 1977, and now the figures are for all languages are over 700 million. At least that's what the 50th anniversary magazine quoted. It said 620 million, I think it was, that were published. This is a very significant feature that so many books were published back in 1977, 55 million. To become a best-selling book, one only has to sell like a few thousand, and this is in the millions, so it is very significant. Prabhupada said once that his only complaint was that people don't read my books. He worked very hard to publish books. He would be up at 2 or 3 in the morning translating books, and very often devotees wouldn't read them. They would just distribute them. And he said, what is the good of you just selling things? What if someone asks you, are you reading these books? You say, I don't read them, I just sell them. So he kind of chuckled, because that happens. I made it a requirement for all of my disciples to read at least 30 pages of Prabhupada's books every day. And if we look at the books, there's not really a lot of English. I mean, Srimad Bhagavatam and Chaitanya Chaitamrita, not on each page. So the pages go pretty fast. It's more like reading about 20 or 15 pages every day. But it's very important to read the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. It makes us very strong in Krishna consciousness the more we read. Because Maya is very strong, it's easy to be defeated by impersonalists and mammonists and many people who are just immersed in the material world. They think that we're enjoying some sort of fantasy, or we're escapists. But if the philosophy is fully understood, and never can be fully understood, but if it can be better understood by reading regularly, then these fallacious arguments are not going to be so effective on us. When the deprogramming movement was prominent in the late 70s, 74, 75, 76, and 77, the anti-cult people found that getting Hare Krishnas to renounce their faith was the most difficult. They were trying to get people in other so-called faiths to renounce their allegiance. They found that the people that were Hare Krishnas were the most difficult to get to renounce their faith. And it was largely because the philosophy is very thorough. The philosophy of Krishna consciousness is very complex and very thorough. Sometimes we read that even great demons like Hiranyakashipu had previous births of being devotees. So it's very, very thorough and very complex and very complicated. For example, that's one example. Another example is that we espouse the principle of ahimsa, or nonviolence, and yet there's a statement in the Srimad Bhagavatam that the animals that have hands prey upon and on animals that don't have hands. So, in a sense, the Srimad Bhagavatam recognizes that there is violence in the world. That there are people that eat meat, and it's a sort of natural thing. It's not a good thing, but it is part of the material world. That very bad things do go on. So it's a very, very thorough philosophy, and if one becomes familiar with this philosophy, it's not very easy, but it's easier to debate with people who think that we're escapists, or we're living in some fantasy world and there's no philosophy to it. there is a philosophy, and it's a very deep philosophy, as we can see by reading these purposes. Very, very thorough and very complete. So the more we read, the more we become strong in Krishna consciousness, and the more we're able to defeat people who think that Krishna consciousness doesn't have a philosophy, or it's just a philosophy of escapism, it's sentimentalism, and it's not genuine. Books are very important. Even people who are great criminals used to be enamored with Vedic philosophy. People like Hitler. I don't know if you're aware of it, but this symbol of the swastika, he used it. He inverted it a little bit, or he inverted it and rotated it to something like 45 degrees angles. But we've heard that he had an astrologer who was an Indian or based in India, and that he used the information he got from this astrologer for his various wartime campaigns. Of course, he was a great criminal, but it shows that even people with a very strong criminal mentality have a certain amount of respect for Vedic literature. And I don't know if this is a bit of history, but because there were many Indian Gurkhas fighting for the British, they were given back by Hitler to Subhash Chandra Bose to form the Indian National Army. And the Indian National Army was responsible for getting India to be free of British rule. So in a sense, Adolf Hitler, although he was a great criminal, one of history's greatest criminals, was responsible for liberating millions of people in a sense, because it was that Indian National Army which caused the British to withdraw. They realized that they were going to have a big fight in their hands, whereas with Gandhi and his so-called nonviolence, they could live with that, but they couldn't live with if there was going to be war. So they thought they were, I don't know if they thought this, but when they divided India and Pakistan, giving so-called liberation to India, and I think Prabhupada or someone said that it was a parting kick because they wanted to maintain trade with both Mohammedans and Indians and Hindus. They left. We were reading the other day about this is somewhat related, not exactly related, but when the representative of the British king, this is in the days of Indian rule, when he used to come to India, when the viceroy used to come to India. The viceroy means like the vice president or the vice king, viceroy. And they offered the viceroy many things out of respect for the British crown. They offered him jewelry and so many things. And the rule was, and it actually came to pass, that the viceroy never touched any of the things that were, especially the jewels that were offered to him, because they were the property, they had become the property of the king. This is a way of saying that if you love me, love my dog, or that the representative of Krishna is honored as much as the Supreme Lord, one of Vishwanath Chakravarti's prayers. Many things that Prabhupada said have not yet manifested, but they are bound to come to pass. For example, he said that the moonshot was all done in a laboratory. He said that overpopulation is a false theory. It was even opined as early as about 200 years ago when John Robert Malthus, who was an economist and also a bit of a cleric or a holy person, he was concerned that the population was going to outstrip the food supply. And after 200 years, it has never happened. I used to look out the window of an airplane. I used to go back and forth across the United States many times in a year, and I would see vast tracts of land, uninhabited land. And it was amazing to me even then, of course I was a devotee, I realized that most people were living in big cities like New York and Los Angeles and Detroit and Dallas. And so it came to pass that I realized that this overpopulation theory is not proper. And when I was working with Dhruta Karma, we were doing some research, and he determined that all the people, if every man, woman, and child that's alive on the planet now somehow were able to live in the country of France, everyone would have hundreds of square meters of space around them, all the people. So, and this was learned about 25 years ago. So things like this, Prabhupada's declaration that the moonshot was faked, and that overpopulation is a false theory, and he said that many times, it's a false theory, are things that they may be considered to be controversial theory. What do they call this? Alternative theories? Conspiracy theories. But nonetheless, Prabhupada said, even if I die, I will maintain that human beings did not go to the moon. He said that, even if I die. He was that convinced about it. So there were many things that he brought, not only a philosophy, but a whole culture with him, a dress culture, a food culture, and many other things. And there was still in existence, when Prabhupada first came, the idea of polygamy, that a man could have several wives. Of course, that's the idea of sati was banned, was made illegal in India in about 1729, I think it was. The idea was that the fire of separation was greater than an actual fire. So when in those days, when a wife committed suicide, it was considered to be less painful than the pain of living with a deceased living in the so-called presence of a deceased husband. Anyway, that was what happened. But anyway, that idea and the idea of decentralization and deurbanization, maybe it's gaining more credibility now that there's a little tiny, invisible to the naked eye virus going around, and it's causing a lot of businesses to cease to exist. The Back to the Land movement is certainly gaining more currency, at least among the more thoughtful people. So these are some of the things that come to mind that. But on the other hand, most people aren't very thoughtful. And I was reading the other day that the fast food outlets were lined up. Cars were lined up for them to open because they had eased the restrictions. They wanted to get their meat while it would be possible to get it. So anyway, it's just it's good for some people and very bad for other people. So this is the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. I'll read the verse again. O personality of religion, I was greatly overburdened by the undue military phalanxes. Oh, that's the wrong one. This is verse 35. Who therefore can tolerate the pangs of separation from that Supreme Personality of Godhead? He could conquer the gravity and passionate wrath of his sweethearts like Satyabhama by his sweet smile of love, pleasing glance, and hearty appeals. When he traversed my earth's, in brackets, surface, and brackets, earth's surface, I would be immersed in the dust of his lotus feet, and thus would be sumptuously covered with grass, which appeared like hairs standing on me out of pleasure. So any questions or comments? Please ask.
This is a philosophical question. Just when you're reading through the purport in relation to the batteries,
You could just switch it off.
maybe you can repeat the question. Another book is Krishna's walking on the earth. Philosophy that Krishna doesn't come in contact with him through energy, so how do you understand that he's coming in contact with the earth?
There's other statements in the Bhagavatam that says even though Krishna comes to earth and plays the part of an ordinary person, he has nothing to do with the material world. He comes with his own entourage, he comes with his own persona, And that has nothing to do with the material world. Even though it appears to the non-believers that he's an ordinary person, he's not an ordinary person. He's not engaged in ordinary work, and he's not affected by the material energy. Maya is very, very strong, and many people who are in the Krishna consciousness movement have left the Krishna consciousness movement because of Maya's strength. There was even a person who was an intimate disciple, maybe even a secretary, who left the Krishna consciousness movement, and it caused Prabhupada to write a letter. I got this letter because I was temple president. He wrote a letter to all the temple presidents and to all the leaders and GBC people. He said, "I regret to inform you that our godbrother XXXX has become an envious snake." I don't think he wanted to write that letter, but he wrote it anyway, and he sent it out to all of us, and he wanted to warn us to be aware of this person. So it's very, very easy, not easy, but it happens that people, because they don't read and they're not fixed in the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, to be attracted by Maya and to leave the Krishna consciousness movement, thinking that there's something better out there for them to be involved in. It happens. So I'm just warning. I'm not in a position, I guess, to warn anybody about anything, but that it's important to read every day and to stay in Krishna consciousness, and that gives us the ability to stay, because we're very fixed in the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. And it doesn't matter how close we are to people like Prabhupada or other sadhus or very advanced devotees, we can still be attracted by Maya. And there's even instances of people who are very close to the movement who have developed another of their own kind of philosophy and their own way of life. You know, by saying they read Prabhupada's books and they honor Prabhupada and they chant Hare Krishna, but still there's something missing. There's the inability to look up to people who are more advanced than they are. And there's inability to, in a lot of other things in Krishna consciousness, which causes people to become attracted to things other than Krishna consciousness. So one has to be careful. Any? Yes? Just speak loud.
When reading
Lee.
Bhagavatam, how important is it to read the Sanskrit?
Say what?
When we're reading Bhagavatam, how important is it to read the Sanskrit?
Her question was, how important is it to read the Sanskrit? Well, I think one of the reasons that Prabhupada included Sanskrit in his books and used a lot of Sanskrit in his lectures and room conversations was that we lose something when we translate. Even though he did his best translating Sanskrit into English, we lose something. Like he even said that the word rasa, which translates as relationships or feelings of love, and sometimes as mellows. But he even said that the word rasa is a very peculiar word because there is no exact English equivalent, and that it goes for translating from any language into another language. You lose something in the translation. And I think that's one of the reasons why Prabhupada was using Sanskrit, because he wanted us, not all of us, but as many as possible, to learn what these words mean. Like if we learn what rasa means, even though we don't understand it completely, it's beneficial. And if we learn words like ananda and other words, what they mean, we know some of them. They don't have exact English necessarily equivalents, but they're important to know what the emotional impact is, what the connotations of these words are. So I think that there's an importance to Sanskrit being spoken in its original letters, Devanagari, and it's in its transliterated form and its spoken form. I think that not everybody can learn it because it's such a difficult language that it's said that just to learn Sanskrit grammar and studying 8 hours a day can take like 12 years to learn the grammar. It's so and to learn poetry is even more difficult. I think Bhanu Maharaj will confirm that this is true because he's an expert at this language. And I've seen words that sometimes there's no such word. Like I think you had the word panegyricists. which doesn't even exist in the English language, but panegyric does. That's praising somebody. And in days gone by, there were people who made it, that was their livelihood. That's what they did. They praised people. They were panegyricists. But there's no English word in the Oxford English Dictionary or Merriam-Webster Dictionary. Panegyricist. It's just a word that it had to be invented because there really were such people. Anyway, that's my take on Sanskrit. I think it's very important, and if we learn it, even a few words, it's better than nothing. Yes.
I have a question in relation to reading Prabhupada's books. There is a tendency in some temples to give more priority, like I've met people who read translations of Bhaktivinoda Thakur or the Goswamis, but then they don't really read the Bhagavatam. So I was just wondering, and then there is so many books, like you go to a shop in a temple and you see all of them except Prabhupada's books. So I was just wondering, what's your opinion on that? If we should give priority, then when we finish Prabhupada's books, maybe we can start reading the other ones? Or how?
There's I don't know the exact words, but there's a saying in English that you can't break the rules until you know them. The idea is that Prabhupada's books are the basis, and I think that he approved of that saying, that books are the basis. Even though he translated, that was his main occupation, translating these books from Sanskrit and Bengali into English. They formed the basis of all knowledge. And I think that the reading, the Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, which was translated from Old Bengali, and Bhagavad Gita, which was translated from Sanskrit, they are the most important things to read. And I think reading other books, sometimes other books are not even authorized. There was a book I found in the archives once called A Hindu Encounter with Modernity, and there was a picture on the cover of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's face, big picture, like life-size face, and it was completely unauthorized. It was written by a devotee who had left the movement. And so we have to be careful when we go into bookstores, because there's such a vast array of books written by such a vast array of people. Most of them are bona fide, but some of them aren't. And fortunately, it was pointed out to the archives that this book was not authorized. The author even says that the Srimad Bhagavatam was written, or may have been written, a few hundred years ago by a person named Bopadev, which is actually incorrect. And of course, there are many other things. But if we read Prabhupada's books and his translations or the BBT translations, we can be assured that we're on the right path. And to read books of course, Prabhupada wanted us to read books of all the acharyas, and I think that's important. But the problem is that many of the translators of these books are either impersonalists or just engrossed in material life. So it's difficult to know what's bona fide and what isn't bona fide. We have to be a little bit careful.
But I'm talking more about the shops in temples. It has to be like a strict selection of the books that go there?
Well, I don't know, because I don't run any bookstores, but I think the people who select books for bookstores have to be careful about what books they select, and to give Prabhupada's books a prominent place in those bookstores, with the idea that some of the books are not authorized, but generally they are. But there's a danger. There's padam yad vipadam natesham. The danger at every step. So it says in Sanskrit, padam yad vipadam natesham. So that's kind of a poetic verse. Padam. It's got a rhythm. It's got a cadence to it. Anyways, we have to be a bit careful, because every step we take, whether it's into a bookstore or on the earth, there's danger. Hare Krishna. I think when a number of Prabhupada's books were first translated into the French language, they were abandoned because it was determined that was a very poor translation. So they were retranslated by some other people who were more professional, and those books are apparently the books that French people can now read. So, like I say, there's always danger there's something always lost in translation, and sometimes it's worse than others. So from that perspective, we have to be careful too, that if we're reading books in other languages other than English, which Prabhupada, I mean, they're usually okay, like we were reading the figures of books translated into Spanish and Mandarin and whatever. They're usually okay because they're but then again, we're reading books that were translated from English, and it's gone, like, you know, it's 2 or 3 languages removed from the original language. So there is a danger always. I noticed that in Russian language they use the word commentary instead of the word purport. And I don't think there's a word for purport. It's an unusual word, purport. It's like the essence of a thing. But commentary can be what anyone says about anything. It's the nearest to the word purport, but it's really not the same. Isn't that right? Shamamrita, who speaks Russian, is nodding her head. Well, I think that's true. It's, you know, people say commentary, but it's really not a commentary. It's the essence. It's a purport. It's the deepest meaning of the thing. That's why Prabhupada selected that word, purport, even though we very seldom see that word anywhere. So I think I better end, since we're 15 minutes over time. Hare Krishna. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.